Welcome, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening to hear Elise discuss searching for the missing after the Holocaust. Elise works at the Wiener Holocaust Library in London, managing the International Tracing Service archive. She has a Master of Letters, which analysed gendered experiences in concentration camp memoirs, as well as holding a Master of Arts in Museum Studies. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Elise tonight, and we look forward to hearing her presentation this evening.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and hello everyone. It's lovely to be here. If you can't hear me for any reason, just give me a nod and I'll adjust my settings. My plan for today is to talk a little bit about the library that I work for, the Wiener Holocaust Library, and then move on to discuss the International Tracing Service archive, which is a remarkable collection. And then I'm going to talk about how we use it today to continue searching for the missing and to find out what happened to people caught up in Nazi persecution. So just a bit of background, first of all, on the Wiener Holocaust Library. The Wiener is actually the world's oldest institution dedicated to the study and research of the Nazi era and the Holocaust. We were founded by the chap that you can see on the left of the screen, Dr. Alfred Weiner. We no longer allow smoking in the library, but we clearly did when that photo was taken. Um, Alfred Weiner was a German Jew, and when he returned from fighting in the First World War to Berlin, he became increasingly alarmed by the growth of anti-Semitism that he could see in German society, and he began to try and raise awareness of the threat that this was posing. And very early on, he identified the Nazi Party as being a particular threat. So it became his work and his mission to gather evidence about the Nazi Party and the growth of anti-Semitism, to raise awareness of the dangers it posed, and to produce his own counter material. When the Nazis came to power, he was advised to leave the country, so he and his wife and daughters moved to Amsterdam, and they founded the Jewish Central Information Office there, and they continued their work. So at this point, there he had a staff. They were gathering a lot of documentation. They're trying to raise awareness of the threat of the Nazi Party internationally at this stage as well. And then with the November 38 pogroms, also known as Kristallnacht, Wiener realised that even Amsterdam wasn't going to be safe enough, and he moved himself and his collection to London, where we've been based ever since. Unfortunately, some of the staff also came out in time, got out of Holland in time, but Wiener's wife, Dr. Margaretha Wiener, and their three girls did not escape in time and were arrested and sent first of all to Westerbork and then to Bergen-Belsen concentration camps. And Dr. Margaretha Wiener, all four of them were actually released in January 1945 as part of a very rare prisoner exchange program. But Dr. Margaretha Wiener died literally on the train taking them to Switzerland and freedom. So for Alfred Wiener and other members of our staff were murdered by the Nazis as well. So for the library, this was always a very personal as well as an ethical and a political endeavour. During the war years, the library provided information and intelligence to the Allied governments, and then after the war, continued to provide evidence to inform prosecutions during trials of Nazis. So we gave a lot of documentation and information to the Nuremberg trials, for example, and more recently, the David Irving libel trial. We provided a lot of information there. Um, since the war years, we continue to collect material, and we have hang on, let me just check my next slide. Yes, so this is what I should have said, sorry. We are based in London still. So we've been in London since 1939. We're in Russell Square, which is very close to Euston. It's very central. So if you are ever in the area, please do call in. We have a lovely exhibition space and a lovely reading room, and a huge collection of items and materials that anyone can look at. So we collect a bit more broadly than you might anticipate. So while our main point is and always will be the Holocaust and the Nazi era, we do also collect on some other genocides as well. For example, the drawing you can see here on the top right of your screen is from the Darfur refugee camps, and we have a collection of children's drawings where they um, sort of a form of testimony of what happened when their villages were attacked. But we also have obviously a huge range of books, photographs, documents. We've got a lot of family records, and a few items as well, a few sort of physical items. As I said, we also have a exhibition program, an education program, an outreach program. So we are quite a big hitter for considering how small we are physically. We do have quite a big reach. So I would, and we do have an awful lot of digital resources as well. I realise coming to London, not very easy for most of you, but we do have a lot of online materials that you can look at. So here are some examples. In the centre there, you can see Pogrom November 1938. That is a group of a collection of testimonies that were gathered in the days and weeks after the November 38 pogrom was happening. So people were telegramming the library and saying, this is what's happening to us right now. And then people were writing their memories the days after and the weeks after. So that collection is very important because it's contemporaneous and it has this vividness and this immediacy that testimonies gathered decades later may not have. That being said, we also have testifying to the truth, which is eyewitness testimonies gathered in the 50s and the 60s. Another remarkable resource. You can search it by name, by theme, by location. So if you're interested in any of these topics, I would recommend having a look at our online collections. The refugee map is another interactive digital resource which is informed by family papers. So you can track families' trajectories around the world and how they fled and patterns of migration and that sort of thing. We do also have, if any of you are talking to children about this topic, I know it's very difficult to know how to talk about something as awful as the Holocaust with children. We have a website called Holocaust Explained, which is aimed at children, and it is based on material from our collections. And there's no atrocity images, there's nothing graphic, but it's all very factual, very accurate, and excellent research. So if any of you are involved in teaching or chatting to younger family members, I would recommend Holocaust Explained. That being said, so we have this lovely raft of digital offerings, but for me at least, they all pale into insignificance when we think about our digital copy of the International Tracing Service archive. And this is the archive that I run the program for. And this is where I just think this is the most remarkable collection, and I'm always very excited to talk about it. So I'm very happy to introduce it to you all now. So the International Tracing Service, we'll start with what the actual service is. Basically, as early as 1942, the Allied governments recognised that there was a crisis of unprecedented dimensions unfolding in continental Europe. Millions of people were somewhere other than where they wanted to be, whether they're in the concentration camp system, whether they're forced labourers, or they've had to leave their home because of circumstances of war. Something like 20 million people were on the move in continental Europe. And a large number of these people were separated from their families, separated from their communities, had no idea where their relatives were, or even if they were still alive. And so various military organisations, charities, survivor groups, governmental groups began these disparate efforts to trace and to register the missing. But obviously, you can't really have this sort of scattergun approach. So eventually, all of these various efforts to trace and register the missing coalesced into one service that was called the International Tracing Service. The physical headquarters of this were in central Germany, in a town called Bad Arolsen. And this then became the focal point where efforts to find the missing and also documentation would all be brought together into this one tracing service to try and facilitate reunions, to try and find people dead or alive. And that's a very, very truncated history. It's a fascinating history, the early sort of search history. So if anyone does want more detail, I can recommend some excellent books on it. But there's this real sense in the early days, a lot of the tracers were themselves survivors and displaced persons. So there's a very ethical imperative. You can see there the quote from Centre Hertz. Basically, as soon as survivors and refugees were physically well enough to think about anything other than basic survival, it's finding their relatives. This is such a, you see it again and again in the testimonies. It's such a driving factor, trying to find community, trying to find family, trying to find loved ones. So the International Tracing Service, in order to do this work, gathered together millions and millions and millions of documents, and it also generated a great deal of documentation in the search. So now the archive, the ITS archive, contains over 30 million documents connected with the experiences of 17.5 million people. Um, it's vast. I've seen it. I work with the digital version, but I've seen the physical version, and it's unnerving to see the scale of the premises. And also 30 million documents is too much to get my head around. So I tend to think about documents in two different categories, and I've got some examples to show you them now. The first category is Nazi and perpetrator documentation, and the second category is post-war material. So I've got some examples of perpetrator material first. So in the archive, you get a lot of material like this, which is an individual person's documentation from the camps. So this is for Clara Fried. It's her prisoner card from Buchenwald. And you can see on the left-hand side, you've got very basic biographical information, date of birth, place of birth, she's single, her last address, that sort of thing. On the right-hand column, we can see a physical description. We know how tall she is, we know what colour her eyes were, we know what languages she spoke. But this card also contains information about her persecution. So towards the bottom left, you can see she has also been in Auschwitz. In the central column, you can see she's been in Bergen-Belsen, she's been in Buchenwald, and we've got the dates on which she was transferred between them. Top right corner, you've got her prisoner number, her prisoner category. You've also got her parents' name on this card. And these cards are only sort of yay big. They're only very quite small cards. But you can see that from one document, you can really start to unpick a person's life and unpick a person's trajectory and start to build a map of where that person might have been when. As well as this kind of information and documentation about an individual prisoner, there's an awful lot of list material. So this, for example, is a list of people who were transported from Berlin to Theresienstadt on 5th of December 1942. And each line refers to one person. And again, you've got what could be seen as quite basic biographical information, but sometimes that's the only information we have about a person. And we've got their last address, we know if they're married, do they have children, how old are they? And families were often listed together here. So on this kind of document, you can sometimes find relatives that no one knew existed. So that can be these can be very powerful documents. And again, you're tracing someone's trajectory, so you know where they were and when. We also have, so this book, this page comes from the Mauthausen concentration camp, and it's actually from the death registry. Each line again refers to one prisoner. Left-hand side contains personal details. The right-hand side contains the alleged cause of death and the date of death. And if I don't know if you can make it out, but all of the causes of death on the right-hand side are the same. It says auf der Flucht erschossen, shot to death while trying to escape. And the dates of death are the 6th and 7th of September 1944. And so when I saw this, I thought, well, I wonder what this was. Was this a mass escape attempt? Was this a breakout? You know, what's happened here? And when I looked into it in more detail, it's actually no, it was this is a lie. You know, this was a massacre of Dutch and British SOE agents perpetrated by the SS in the Mauthausen quarry. So this page is always a very good reminder to me and to anyone working with this archive that a lot of this material is Nazi material, it's perpetrator material, and we have to interrogate it in quite a critical way. There's also an awful lot of post-war documentation in the archive. So this, for example, this little girl, Suzanne Hochher, there's a child search branch and was part of the archive, part of the tracing service specifically looking at and for children. And so you have these sort of very heartrending images of children or requests to try and find out what had happened to some children. So this little girl was deported to Auschwitz in July 42, and given her age and the time at which she was deported, you know, she will not have survived deportation. There's also a section of the child search branch which is about foundling children, where they will find a child in a bombed out city who either has no relatives or can't find them, or sometimes when they're so young they can't remember they don't know their parents' names, they don't know their own surnames. So you had these researchers who are these field workers who would try and figure out who these children were and whether there was anyone to care for them. Other examples of post-war documents um, are connected with it's called the Graves Recheck Program, where field workers from the ITS, the International Tracing Service, sorry, would follow, for example, the routes of a death march, and they would interview people along the way and say, was anyone killed near here? And then they would report that. The ITS did not have the power to exhume the bodies, but they could be there when it was happening and try to identify the dead from the clothing or tattoos on them or what have you, and then rebury them in a more dignified manner. This map, for example, shows the grave of three Soviet POWs just to the top right. You can see the graves marked there. So these maps is a very, very moving and a very interesting section of the archive as well. As well as that sort of material, there's an awful lot of information about survivors and people who became displaced persons. So this, for example, is a displaced person's registration record. It's actually for Elie Wiesel, who was the author of Nacht. And again, you can see it's just a small card, but you've got his name, his date of birth, place of birth, religion, parents' names, last address, where he wants to go. And then so again, you can sort of it's just one document, but you can really start to unpick a person's path, especially in the chaos of the post-war period. And also, we have material like this in the archive. This is an emigration list of displaced persons and refugees moving to Canada. And one of the reasons I wanted to include this document is because you can see it's dated 4th of December 1951. And I think sometimes there's a misconception that 1945 came around, the end of the war, liberation, problem solved, like that's it. Like liberation as a moment, which is absolutely not the case. You know, liberation was a very long, drawn out process. And here as late as 1951, sort of 6 years after the end of the war, there's still documentation being produced about survivors and displaced persons. And there's a little boy on this record. Where is he? Second from the bottom, little Heinrich, and he's only 15 months old. So this is a boy who's been born in the displaced persons system. He's never known any other life than this. So I also want to include that document because it gives sort of an idea of the temporal spread of the material in the archive. So it's going from the early 30s through to sort of the mid 50s, really. Um, I thought I had another slide there, sorry. Another hugely important section of the archive is tracing requests. So people would write in and say, do you have any trace of my brother? I don't know what happened to my cousin, my whole family's gone. And you have these letters from survivors or or relatives. And they can be deeply, deeply moving. But again, one letter can mention huge numbers of family, 10 family members, and you only knew about one of them. And suddenly from this one letter, you're seeing this whole family tree is kind of unveiled out in front of you. And we see a real spike in the number of requests, for example, in the 50s and 60s when the compensation claims started to be put into action. So there's a lot of information from survivors and from the families of victims from the 50s and 60s as well. And we're still getting these requests for help all the time, which is what I'm going to move into now. So a little bit more institutional history. The ITS in Germany was very open for a while, and researchers could go in and families were being helped. And then through the 70s and 80s and 90s, it became increasingly closed. So researchers weren't allowed to access the material. Families were waiting years and years to hear back if they even did. And it became something of a bit of a secret, really, to the extent that some cities and some businesses would put their documentation connected with what they did during the Holocaust in the archive because it was seen as such a closed place. It's almost somewhere you could hide information. And then during the 90s and the early 2000s, there became this international pressure to open up this archive because it's remarkable and the information we can find in it is incredible. But there had to be a real push for the archive to become open and accessible. So then it was successful. In the early 2000s, digital copies were made of the archive, and digital copies were offered to various countries around the world. And the UK was offered a copy, which we accepted. and a digital copy, I mean, and it was given to the Wiener Holocaust Library to look after. So we have had the UK's copy of this archive since I think it's 2011, I think, and we've had it open till since 2013. So it's still a fairly young collection for us to be working with. But yes, that's why the library has the copy, the UK's copy, and I run the team and run the program that works with it. So how we at the library use this incredible archive is we use it in three main ways. So first of all, oh, sorry, excuse me. First of all, we use it to support professional research. So academics can come in and use it, and we work with television programs, authors, heritage organisations, universities, that kind of thing. And we help those people extract information from the archive to use in their teaching or their research or television programs, whatever it is. We also use it to inform our own internal research. So most of our exhibitions now feature material from the archive. Our staff use it to write presentations and journal articles, and something else. Yes, so we use it internally. But the heart of the work that we do and the core of the work is we use this remarkable collection to help families find out what happened to their loved ones during the Holocaust and the Nazi era. So we are still doing tracing requests now. So what will happen there is someone will write to us and say, we never knew what happened to our great uncle, say, and then my team will search through the archive. We will find any documents that we can that mention the sought person. But then we don't think there's any point in just dropping a document on people, and most of whom don't speak German. So then what we also do is we will decode, we'll do a brief translation if necessary, and we write a report basically explaining everything that we found in chronological detail. And we try and suggest other avenues of research that might be helpful, and further reading that people can do. Um, so yes, I've pulled my statistics from 2025. There's only three of us doing this research, but you can see here some of the excuse me, some of the statistics from last year. The split there between family research and professional research, that's almost always 75%, 25%. We always have more family researchers wanting to work. But interestingly, we've had a real spike, not spike, we've got a steady rate of about 5 and 6% of our cases are still on behalf of Holocaust survivors. And those cases can be deeply, deeply moving, and impactful. I was working with a woman recently, a couple of years ago now, crikey, and I think about time going. I worked with a woman who was a child survivor from Berlin. She'd been in Theresienstadt, and then she'd actually come to the UK afterwards, and she'd been adopted over here. And then I met with her, and she said, "Oh, I just want to find out what happened to my mum. Like, I don't know what date she died. I know she died, but I don't know what date, and I'd love to know." And then I found her mum on one of those deportation lists that I showed you earlier. But when I found the mum, underneath the mum were two children, Kurt and Rivka, who were this woman's brother and sister that she had forgotten she'd had. So, and they were killed at the same time as the mother. So to talk to the survivor and sort of to have to explain to her that she'd had a brother and sister as well. This is very, very impactful stuff. This is very important to people still. And we do take seriously the responsibility, that the ethical responsibility of the work we do. And we try and deliver the work in a careful, trauma-informed manner. So if you're thinking, oh, well, that sounds quite interesting, I would like to access or like to get help accessing this archive and see if there's any information in there that's relevant to my research, this is how I would suggest you proceed. So you can access the ITS archive via a copy holding institution. That's us, for example, the Wiener Holocaust Library. Sorry, one sec. Oh, sorry about that, little tickle. Other copy holding institutions include United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Yad Vashem, so you could always approach them as well. Sydney Jewish Museum did have access to it for a time. I don't know if they still do, but it could be worth sending them an email to see if they can help. But we're more than happy to help. We do not restrict our we don't just work with people in the UK. Anyone who asks us for help, we will try our best to help. So if you have family members that you would want researching, do feel free to click that link, submit a research request, and we will try and get to you as soon as we can. One thing I would say, when we don't charge for this service, one thing I would say is that we do have quite a backlog of cases, so it can be a few months before we can get to your case, unless there's a reason that you need it doing very, very quickly. So, for example, anything for a Holocaust survivor, we would do immediately. And anything where you need the information, say because you're applying for citizenship or you're laying a memorial stone and you need the information by a certain date, just let us know and we'll try and kind of triage the cases and get to yours a bit sooner. If you're thinking, well, that sounds great, I'll submit a request, but what can I do in the meantime? There is an online version of this archive. And should we see if the link works together? Sorry, I'm in very rural Cumbria in the northwest of England at the moment, and the Wi-Fi is not great, I'm afraid. If not, I can just sort of talk you through it. We'll see if that loads. Did I put a screen? No, I didn't. Rats. Here we go. So, I don't know if this is familiar to many of you, but this is the online version of the archive that you can access by through the link in the chat that I've just done.
We're still seeing your
Oh.
slide.
Rats. Okay. What I need to do then is stop sharing briefly and then reshare. I'll be right back. Da, 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 da. Okay. Can you now see Arlson Archives blue screen? Yeah. Great. Oh, thank you. I got some thumbs
Yeah,
up there. Thank you.
good.
So this is the online version of the archive. As I said, I don't know if this is familiar to many of you or any of you. There's two ways of navigating it. You can browse the archive. And this will, oh, don't be this slow, my goodness me. Right, we'll go back to the home screen because basically I was going to say don't bother browsing the archive because it's very, very interesting, but it's set up. You can see the archival tree and you can click all the links through and you can follow the structure of the archive. But to actually get to a document that you're specifically looking for, don't browse it. The search function here is the best way to navigate this material. In here, you could search for a person. Oop, sorry. Oh, ugh. Or you could search for a place, or you can search for a theme. So if you were interested, for example, if you're interested in euthanasia, the T4 program, you could put in euthanasia and that would bring up the material there. Oh, what's it done? See, this is actually quite good because it's not being very good. Let me make this a more specific search. Okay, here we go. This is a bit better. So say you were looking for someone called Rivka Auerbach. You can see you can add more and more details in this bar at the search function here. Now say we know that she was born in 1924. We can search there. You don't have to bother putting and or anything like that. Just drop all the terms in. And here we have 3 records. So to access these, just click anywhere on there. The left-hand side shows your search, where your searching is. This is where you do the work on the left-hand side. And then the right-hand side brings up the document. Where is she on here? Auerbach, there she is, Auerbach Rivka. But now what is this document? See, this is where it starts to get a bit more problematic, and you think, oh, right, okay. So it's a post-war document listing people in Munich, basically listing for non-Germans who were in Munich at the time the document was created. That doesn't matter. This isn't there. Let's just keep clicking through. There's another one. And then sometimes you can get these quite large files. Hang on, I just need to move. Over there. And you can click through And you can zoom in. And you can save the documents as well if you'd like to by using the print function down here. In some ways, this is amazing. Now, don't get me wrong, I think this is absolutely incredible that this material is online and that anyone with an internet connection can find these details. Let me just see if here it was 1939. This is the children I mentioned earlier. This is the deportation list from Vienna to Auschwitz, where I was searching for the survivor's mum. And I also found the Brandler was the mum. And I also found little Curtin Rivka as well. So yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Let's go back to sort of the archive more broadly. It's incredible that this is available online, and the search functionality is getting better and better. Let's pop in Leipzig. But a lot of the material is embargoed, so legally it can't be put online, so you can't see it and it'll be grayed out and you can't see the document. It's also not quite there yet in terms of how the material has been indexed. So while there's 26 million documents online, it's very hard to actually get to the document you want to see. And this is, I'm casting no aspersions on anyone's research skills here. I'm casting no aspersions on Arelson's work getting this online. They're doing an amazing job and it's going to get only going to get better and better and better. But I would say if you search in this archive and you don't find anything, or if you search in this archive and you do find something, still come to us because we'll have a search in our version and we'll see if we can find more documentation. Just as an example, I, out of interest, I ran a case recently where I searched in for a chap in this version that you can see on your screen, and I found 3 documents. And I searched for the same chap in the version of the archive I work with, and I found something like 96 documents. So it can be a very stark difference. Yes, another thing I want to show you also, I just want to show you an example of a document, because another issue with these documents is you might find it and then think, well, great, but what on earth does this actually mean? What is this showing me? But fortunately, there is a resource which is incredible, which I think I might actually just skip straight to. The people who developed this archive have also developed an online research guide, which you can use to unpick document types, and it will explain to you what the documents show. Sorry, this is taking a while to load. Here we are. So let's go to concentration camps. So this e-guide is a very helpful tool in unpicking material from the archive. So say you find this document, for example, but you think, well, I don't really understand what I'm looking at here. You can search the e-guide to find this material. It gives you a basic introduction on the right-hand side here to showing what this document is and what it means. If you scroll down, the questions and answers section is amazing. It contains so much detail about what the documents are, what they were used for, what you need to consider when you're looking at a particular document. But also what you can do is if you click on a certain section of the card, it will give you extra information about that particular section. So here, what's this bit up here? Oh, it's all to do with the prisoner number. Here, it just sort of unpicks it and tells you what you're looking at. So I would say if you are thinking, oh, I really want to see if there's information in the ITS archive that's connected with my family, I would say take a 3-pronged approach right now. I would say submit your research request to us or another institution. I'm not precious as say go like that sounds awful, but there's lots of places that will help you with this, but we are one of them, and do feel free to come to us. But also at the same time, have a little dig around online on the website that I showed you earlier and use this e-guide to unpick whatever documents you find. Right, I'm going to go back to the other. I'll have to stop sharing briefly. Okay, so we should be back to the presentation now. And here at the bottom, that's the link to that e-guide where you can unpick the records. And okay, do you know what? I think actually I'm just going to stop sharing now and talk at you for a bit. So just a few caveats. If you are thinking, oh, great, I really hope that we can sort of find some material about our families in this collection. As I said, it's a vast archive, 30 million documents. The level of detail you can find about some people is remarkable. It's sort of what block someone was in Buchenwald, the date of a childhood inoculation, that kind of level of detail. But that being said, there are some very significant gaps in the archive. So, for example, um, there's almost nothing from the Action Reinhardt camps. So by that I mean Chelmno, Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, the extermination camps, because the material, the documentation was either never kept in the first place or it was deliberately destroyed. There's not a huge amount from the larger, excuse me, ghettos. There's very little from Warsaw Ghetto, for example. And there's also very little information about people who were killed in the so-called Holocaust by bullets, which was sort of the big shooting actions in Eastern Europe. As a general rule, the further west a person was when their victimization began, the more likely they are to feature in documentation. And that is quite straightforward reasons, really. If a person was arrested in France, say, and then sent to Drancy camp, and then transferred from Drancy to Auschwitz, and from Auschwitz to another subcamp, there's lots of points on that journey where that person is going to need to be recorded by name by the Nazis to kind of keep a track of what's going on. However, for a person who was killed very close to their home, in Ukraine, for example, that's shot very near their home, there's no documentation that's going to name that person, which we know can be very, very upsetting for people when there's no paperwork about it. I know it sounds silly, but there's this idea that the Nazis kind of were punctilious record keepings and they recorded everything when they just didn't really. They only recorded it when it was logical to do so and when it facilitated genocide. When it didn't, they didn't really see the point in recording it. So I would just, as amazing as the archive is, and we will always try our best to help you, I would just caveat that there are some areas where there's nothing, but we will always try and explain why there's nothing and think of other institutions that might be able to help more if that is the case. I think that was about all I had prepared. I can see a few questions have come in the chat. Shall I just...
Yeah, just scroll through them.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Terry, does the ITS have records of those murdered in the Chelmno death camp? As I said, not necessarily, but where we might have records would be if a surviving family member wrote asking about the person in the 50s or 60s, say. Also, if there was a deportation, I know a lot of people were sent to Chelmno from the Łódź ghetto.
Yeah.
We may have a note in the Łódź ghetto document saying the date on which they were transferred to Chelmno, but from Chelmno itself, I'm afraid not. How close is the Wiener Library work with the Ad Vashem? Yep, collegiate, I would say. You know, we work quite well together. We will refer to each other when it's appropriate and necessary, but we're our own separate institutions. But yeah, I'd say a friendly collegiate relationship for sure. Does ITS have any kinder transport records? No, Deborah, that's another one of the gaps. I've been doing research this week for a kinder transportee, and she features in one document in the archive, which is like a school card is in the archive for some reason. So sometimes you can find like a little document like that for someone who's on the kinder transport, but where we can help is on any family members who were left in Europe. Mainland Europe, sorry. So we can trace. So this week I've been tracing what happened to the kinder transportees' parents, say, and siblings. What we can do, though, is that we work quite closely with World Jewish Relief, who are a London-based organisation, and Association of Jewish Refugees, who have much more material about the kinder transport. So that's a good example of ITS. I might not be able to help, but I could probably tell you someone else who could help. So it's still worth coming to us, and we'll do our best to point you in better directions. Excuse me. Terry, I'm still trying to find what happened to one of the sisters of my grandfather, but I'm not sure of the spelling of her married surname. What do I do in that case in terms of searching for her and her immediate family? So, if you know the maiden name, we
I
can
know
still,
that. I know
yeah,
that.
we can definitely search with maiden names. The ITS, the original researchers, or the original tracing service, created this incredible phonetic search system. So you imagine how many spellings there are for Joseph Rubinstein. So they have created this very, very sensitive, it's called the central name index, and they've in there they also input maiden names and all those sorts of variations as well. So if the maiden name is recorded in a document somewhere, hopefully we should be able to find her still. And also, sorry, one sec. What I would suggest is even if you don't have the specific surname, it's still worth us looking because we could look for your grandfather's name and he might have written in, or he might be on a list somewhere with the rest of his family. There may be some links. So it's always worth us having a look. Just every now and again, you can turn up something um that can be very helpful. So I would still say, yeah,
Thank you.
still have a look.
Thank you.
Lee, any photos of family? I'm afraid it's very rare for us to have photos in the ITS archive. Um, Sometimes there will be photographs, like prisoner photographs, which are not very pleasant to sort of see, and it's not kind of the sort of thing you're after. Sometimes for survivors and displaced persons, there'll be photographs of them as part of their what's the word? Um, if people are trying to emigrate and they're putting together a visa application. So just recently, actually, it's a lovely file, which is a real change of pace for me to work with a document that's nice. And it was a married couple, and they were trying to emigrate from Czechoslovakia, I think, to America. And he worked in flour mills, and she was a dressmaker, and he designed this new system, this new technology for a more refined flour, and she designed dresses. And it's such a lovely file because you see the blueprints of his work and he's standing next to them looking really proud. And there's a picture of her sort of with her sewing machine and some of the dress designs that she's done. And it's such a lovely sense of humanity and life. And it was just such a lovely file to sort of see in the midst of all these awful the kind of ones I normally work with. So every now and again you do see a very lovely photo, but it's very, very rare. I would caution. Um, I don't. It depending on whereabouts your family was from, Lee, it might be worth talking to Yad Vashem or local archives in the area. But um, I know that's a bit of a tricky one, and it's a real sadness for a lot of people. So I'm sorry. Max, how involved was the Red Cross with ITS, if at all? Hugely, yeah. So so sorry. Um, the Red Cross was involved almost from the very beginning, not quite from the beginning. At the very beginning, it was the military who ran the tracing service, but the Red Cross took it over after, hang on, right, 1947, the International Refugee Organization took it over. And a few years after that, the Red Cross took it over and they ran it for decades. And it was towards the end of the Red Cross's era when it started to get like quite closed down because they were sort of saying, well, we're not here to help with academic research, so academic researchers can't come in. And that was where it sort of started to tip into being a more closed resource. So now, so hang on, Red Cross gave up running the archive in early 2000s, and it's now run by an international council of representatives from various countries sitting on the board that's running it. So yes, there's a lot of documentation in there that has like your Red Cross tracing letters across the top of the documents and things like that. So very much so. Rena, yes, Amy Williams in the AJR, she's great to contact about the kinder transport. I don't know if you all know this, but she fairly recently uncovered this big tranche of documents for people who'd been kinder transportees who'd come from Vienna to the UK. And it's amazing, and it's all new information, and British families and families of kindred transport descendants are very, very excited by it. And I'm sure it's all going to be published very soon and be very accessible. But I know that the AJR are working hard with Amy to make that material available to as many people as possible as soon as possible. So yes, I would say email her if you have a kinder in your or a kind in your family background.
Are you
I
there,
think
Liz?
I think that was the end of the questions in the chat.
Yeah. Liz, are you there? Sorry. Liz? Rodney, it might be you.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. Sorry.
Well, I've certainly learned a few things. I mean, I've used the Arrelson collection website numerous times, and yeah, I've often had a lot of success with it, and often had a lot of frustration as well. How about I put my video on? And Yeah, it seems though that yeah, as you said before, there are documents that they have that aren't available on through their main search engine. And I've also found, especially with school records, that there's another website there's another web page on their website where you can search for school records that aren't available in the main search site.
Is that the Reichsvereinigung der Deutschen Juden?
I think so.
Yeah, that's where I found the card for the Kindertransport. Yeah, that's amazing. Can be really interesting.
Yeah, I just don't quite understand why it hasn't been put into the main search engine. Because I can find, for example, the date that my mother started school in Berlin through that. But I don't find her when I search the main one, which is not surprising because they left Germany in 1939. So they weren't caught up with it. But anyway, that's my problem. I just wanted to say thank you very much for all the information you've imparted to us. And I'm sure that you'll get some requests out of it, just to solve those problems that we don't seem to be able to solve ourselves.
I think even if it's knowing that we can't help either, you think, okay, well, I've gone as far as I can down that route. That can be helpful. And sorry, just say I popped my email address in the chat. So if anyone does want to email me, do feel free. I am on annual leave now for about 3 weeks, so it'll be a while till I reply, but my email's there. Sorry, Rodney, interrupted. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, there's been a lot of useful stuff there. I just have to hope that I can get back from the video some of those websites, especially the one on explaining the
Use of it.
the Arrelson documents, because often you find a document, and so it might be a transportation list, and it's not very clear where they're going from or to.
Yes, that can be quite frustrating. I'll circulate my PowerPoint as well so that you've all got the links. If I send that to you, Terry, is that okay?
Yeah, that should work.
Yeah.
Okay, so last call. Any more questions? No? Okay. So
Go take some of that cough mixture, Elise.
I think I could do with some too. Before we go, I do need to remind everyone that 4 weeks from today, we're having an in-person meeting, but basically a workshop to help people break down some of their brick walls. We're calling it Ask the Genealogists, and so that's Sunday, the 19th of July. at a place to be disclosed later. Then we're having another Zoom talk on the 4th of August when Terry is going to talk about some of her Dunera research. And so I think apart from that, thank you, everyone, and good night.
And thank you, Elise. It was
Thank
fantastic.
Thank you
Elise.
very much,
Thanks a lot.
Elise.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye now. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.